when Russia launched Sputnik. Now, 1969 became all the more significant because USA achieved Apollo 11 mission, there was moon landing. But the real commercial space era came in when US enacted space policy in 1990s. So in 1990s, one great thing happened that US and Russia agreed to end the Cold War and also cooperate in space exploration. And that is actually the beginning of new space or the commercial era in the space program globally. Now, what is really involved in space activities? See, we have to have access to space. We have to somehow get into space that is above, a level where aircrafts go. So then we have to put some observational tool in space that is lifting heavy to small satellites or payloads. Then comes taking imagery from Earth. Basically, we started taking images, pictures, and processing those pictures, value addition, services. Then came the telecommunications with satellite constellations or whatever, manufacturing, construction in space, space tourism, mining of asteroids. I mean, today when we talk of gamut of space activities, these are all the things we talk about. That is, everything has to go together. Access, obtaining imagery, building up communication capabilities, having a lot of satellites for observation as well as communication in constellations. And, if you see at the International Space Station today, it is not lifted once. So basically, constructing in space, either by men or by robotic efforts. Okay, so where Janyu is very much into. Then people talk of mining of asteroids, harnessing energy, then scientific research as well as brokerage and space tourism. You must have seen last week a Japanese billionaire went with his cameraman as a tourist. He took a lot of pictures. He went up in Soyuz, came back in Soyuz, and he is going to be the first commercial traveler to moon on Falcon 9 sometime in 23 or 24. Interestingly, people have tried using space also for funeral services. Instead of immersing the ash in Ganges or somewhere, people want to leave the ashes in space. So education with an enterprise in space, developing online education programs, new space companies. I mean, hundreds of things we can talk about. 2020 global satellite industry findings, because it is all same, because developed nations have gone more towards industrializing space activities. We have seen an ingest of lot of low-cost satellites, smaller satellites, more powerful satellites. Launching is becoming more affordable. Satellite services are growing and helping increasing in productivity, developing newer capabilities, contributing to economic growth, make the world much safer, secure, sustainable. So also, the ground systems have been playing a large role. See, in 2020, you may be aware of the government space budgets. It is more than 100 billion, and satellite services about 117 billion, and ground equipment about 135 billion, and others are all small. So really, where the effort goes, money goes, if you talk of employment creation, if you talk of more and more large number of systems, a handheld gadget too, whatever, it happens on the ground actually. So if you just take the satellite services, say for communication, if you see at the 2020 figures, in fact 21 figures should be coming out anytime by December or so, television industry globally takes about 88 to 90 billion, radio broadcasting about 6 billion plus, broadband is about 3 billion, fixed satellite services, that is VSATs, whether it is on land or ocean or wherever, is about 15 to 16 billion. Mobile brings about 2 billion. Remote sensing just under 3 billion. Okay, so satellite manufacturing, if you see in this whole game, it's about 12 to 13 billion. More number of satellites are going up. Launch industry is about 5.5 billion. So ground equipment is about 135 billion. So I have to really appreciate what Janyu Tech with or for their principals or partners, whatever you are trying to do, is an extremely commendable thinking. I must compliment that all of you youngsters and enthusiastic people who have joined hands with this venture, which Abhimanyu has explained to me vividly, thinks of the total system. I mean, satellite processing data and ultimately rolling out services to the benefit of every common man. And you may be aware that, operational satellites are also very much on the increase. By 2020, there were about 4,000 scientific satellites, not 4,000. If you total about 4,000 satellites, and from 2010 to 2020, the number of satellites have grown about three and a half times, hardly 1,000 to 3,500 satellites which were in operation. I will not get into these figures because these are very, very much available in the public domain. I mean, in the coming days or one of these days, I can share, or you yourself, I am sure, quite aware of these statistics, which, the Bryce space industry report, which comes year after year. But one thing which is remarkable is the ingest of small satellites. See, up to about 2008, we had not seen so much of small satellites invading the space arena globally. So we were always talking of, heavy Earth observation satellites, some heavy geostationary communication satellites, or the GPS navigation constellation, and the Galileo never took off. Russia went for GNSS, China went for. So while all these things were happening, now suddenly it looks that everything is being swallowed by the tech entrepreneurs and the newcomers who just made the small satellite constellations a great reality. And sadly, we, India, have so far missed it, badly missed it. Okay, our space program was born in a church actually in Tumba, which is now a museum. It's in the early 60s. Okay, but today we grew into a big program with space centers spread all across the country, and we have many centers under ISRO, under the government, and recently a new center for human space flight also has come up. We still have on paper both Entrix and NSIL, two PSUs. We have a number of public sector enterprise. Grant in aid agencies like Physical Research Lab, NARL, Northeastern Space Application Center, and all that. So, Department of Space is the government department which is directly under Prime Minister, under which ISRO is there. So ISRO has many centers. ISRO has few grant in aid agencies. And under Department of Space, you have two public sector enterprises, Entrix, NSIL. And the apex policy making body for us is Space Commission. From academia, industry, bureaucracy, and also, of course, little of politics. Ministers are there, and Prime Minister is heading. So what happened is, since space technology involved a lot of development, obviously we lived under the shelter of taxpayers' money, government funding. So, but then how Indian space program became a self-reliant indigenous program driven by the national development goals is a really it's a miracle actually, because basically, when we became independent, we had to inherit a lot of things from the earlier regime, and India had a lot of issues. So I think 1952 or so, Planning Commission had come into force. If I'm right, I can't tell the exact date, but then, completely our developmental activities of all sectors were aligned with the goals of national development. While the planning was holistic, the sectoral allocation by the government decided what each sector will do, what each priority will do. I mean, hats off to the visionaries in the space domain. They said we will develop imaging satellite, we will develop communication satellite, we will develop our own rocket. Of course, we also learned a lot by sharing, borrowing, cooperating with foreign countries, developed countries. For example, we had a satellite instructional television experiment called SITE, where about 2,000 villages, the social research guys understood the issues of development. So the Space Department people, through our development education communication unit based at Ahmedabad, made programs relevant to addressing those issues in rural areas. And it was such a huge effort that we had to borrow a satellite from US and broadcast, villages without electricity, villages without any other connectivity. You have to work on batteries, you have to have battery chargers, you have to transmit some 2 hours per day. It is actually the largest social experiment ever conducted in the world using satellite, which happened in India through a borrowed satellite, and that showcased the need of communication satellites for India. So India embarked on building OneSat AC InSat 1A series of satellites. So all the 4 satellites were built at Ford Aerospace in Palo Alto, California, USA, where our teams were working. Our teams worked jointly with them. So basically, the communications program in India started with addressing the rural needs through a borrowed satellite. So also means I can go on telling a lot of stories. So also the imaging or remote sensing, because our planners realized very early that it is important to address, say, agriculture. The first ever experiment using multispectral airborne data or infrared airborne data was in Kerala by Prof. Pisharotti and his team to identify the coconut root wilt disease. So agriculture still remains to be a priority, and today we do crop acreage and production estimation for the country, both for Kharif and Rabi season, that is the regular southwest monsoon season, northeast monsoon season, and we also inventory the summer crops separately. Okay, 1975 we borrowed a satellite Symphony from USA and conducted satellite instructional television experiment in 2000 villages in part of Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh, and some backward areas. Then came the birth of InSat series 82 to 1990, which was completely customized for India's domestic needs. We addressed broadcast and meteorology, and we also made the satellites multi-purpose, introducing a meteorological payload, because once a satellite sits in geostationary, it sees 1/3 of the globe. If you have an imaging radiometer or an imager on top, you can see approaching tropical cyclones, approaching cloud masses, and every half an hour you can take a picture. So why I am stressing this is we quickly started using the space capabilities to meet India's needs, because we are a tropical country close to equator, much affected by tropical cyclones. So we understood that as early as 1980s. Now we should appreciate the way we have progressed, or the world has progressed. The first ever access to space was in 1957 by Russia, and today we are only in 2021. Space program, the way it has developed globally, it is not even as old as me, okay? It's a young program. So then came the InSat 2 series. So we decided, India decided to build satellites indigenously. So that required creation of a lot of new facilities for building, manufacturing, testing, and introduction of VSAT communication and cable TV came in 1991 to 2000 time frame. I still remember 1975 when I joined the remote sensing segment. Basically, that time we had no satellite. When I joined, we had a small 3-seater Beaver aircraft. So I had to undergo special training because the pilot said they can fly, but they can't navigate. So I've flown nearly 250 hours with 3-frequency electromagnetic system, a Varion proton precision magnetometer, and a gamma ray spectrometer, almost all over the mineral belts in this country. So that was a unique experience. Then we started using airborne scanner, 11-channel Bendix multispectral scanner, then airborne thematic mapper, Dedulus ATM we call. Then came aerial photography. Then came this. So really, I had a good opportunity to get into hands-on into how we really progressed. So from 2000 to 2010, we did further capacity augmentation. That is, we made 3 variants of our InSat satellites, 1 ton, 2 ton, and 3 ton category. And DTH communication came in India in KU band, and we also got into exclusive meteorological missions. Say 82 to 90, we just launched 4 satellites geostationary with about 1.2 to 2 ton class of satellites built by Ford Aerospace. 91 to 2000, we just launched 6 communication satellites. 2001 to 2010, we launched 14 satellites. Okay. Then came in the high power satellites with unfurlable antenna, spot beams, in Ka-band and all. So 2011 to 2019, so our satellites became 17 plus actually. So with this kind of capacity augmentation, we have something like 220 transponders of 36 megahertz each today. I mean, giving us a good bit of bandwidth, but that is not good enough. We have also leased about 90 to 95 transponders of 36 megahertz from foreign satellite operators. So today, about 150 out of 220, about 70 satellites are not in commercial use. They are serving strategic sector. About 55 transponders of our own from INSAT GSAT and about 95 borrowed satellites today are in commercial use in India, which is of course grossly inadequate. So we are also soon going to have about 300 gigabits of high throughput capacity. But as of today, we have about 30 gigabits up. About 15 are into use in Andaman Nicobar Islands and border areas in the north. Mostly it is put for governmental use and hope it would be soon for rural connectivity. But the whole equation is going to change with respect to communication, because you have heard of Starlink constellation, OneWeb constellation, and the O3B having been bought by SES Global. Viasat is there, and I mean so many people, and very soon we will find all of you also becoming part of this new revolution, bringing in higher capacity.
So I have this question, like you mentioned that space infrastructure has to be indigenous. So is it for some strategic reasons or what?
Not exactly, because we have only seen the draft policies today where they say that it only mentions a word called NGPE, non-governmental private entity, will be allowed to own space infrastructure. Nothing like it. Because today, if say Boeing registers a company in India, Boeing India or Lockheed Martin in India, they become Indian companies. See, now when it comes to communication, space will facilitate necessary approvals from the space side. Okay, this is what I have heard, the latest update that I have. I am also waiting like everybody else to see the final policy coming out. Telecom services are licensed by the Telecom Ministry. They have already brought out the policy for the low bitrate connectivity. You must have seen it in the web. And when it comes to the uplinking for broadcast policy, they say that the landing rights are to be governed by the land. It is not only true in India, because for any satellite operator, the landing rights have to be given by the host country. Now, some of the concerns our people are having, they are not telling indigenous. Definitely no. So even if any company partners with Starlink today or OneWeb today, now I don't think that should matter, as long as they have registered in India or they have joint venture or partnership with some Indian company. And as Indian company, when they seek license, so that's it. I mean, though major infrastructure is built at somebody's cost, they may only say that okay, you comply with the laws prevailing in India, rules, policies prevailing in India as far as extending services in India. So it is not exactly. We are receiving data from many foreign satellites, and for our IRS satellite, we were having nearly 40 ground stations all over the world, and 2 in China and 2 in Russia also. Even China was receiving data from us. It need not be indigenous, no.
So, in continuation to what Vishesh had asked, you particularly mentioned that in the future, communication infrastructure is likely to go totally, to the space from the current terrestrial one. So, in such a scenario, from a national security point of view, how serious a risk is that? That the entire communication network of the world, in fact, not only of India, but we speak from an Indian perspective, would be controlled by a couple of companies whose interests or intent is something that nobody will have control over. How serious do you?
What will happen is, what I told is, yes, space will have a large share in the whole communication backhauling. There would be terrestrial networks, there would be backhauling, there would be certainly backhauling, but again, what Arthur C. Clarke told, that virtually 3 satellites at geostationary orbit can make communications, reach the whole Earth anywhere to anywhere. And that still stands as a very valid statement even today, because any terrestrial communication effort in the global context is incomplete without satellites augmenting the backhaul. So what I mentioned is, eventually for the end user, see, for me having a mobile phone as my access to the world or anywhere, the technology is neutral, it's in the background. I will really not know whether it is the optical fiber feeding to my router at home which is working, or where exactly that optical fiber is backhauled with a VSAT or a satellite ground station. I don't know, because if you see this ground terminals, which Carvalux is talking about, or the Verizon technology, or tomorrow when aviation connectivity starts working and all. See, basically it can go anywhere. Today, if you see Carvalux, you give a web search of on Carvalux, which Saturn Satellite Networks is talking. They say that a football-sized phased array antenna with a small solar panel can be carried to any place on a motorbike, even remotest rural area, and within 30 minutes you set up, and around which about 50 nodes can work, 50 mobiles can work. In fact, Miasat of recent did a very nice experiment, because when they got into the vaccination drive during the corona pandemic, and they carried a kind of a Wi-Fi hotspot to village. They dropped it, and the health workers went to each village, and online they updated all details about the guy or lady who is getting vaccinated, and there were no connectivities. So the satellite connectivity is going to play a very, very important role. Now, the security aspect, I feel probably some appropriate firewalls, or what you call. I think encryptions, something should prevent. You may be aware that when India had trouble in the borders, all the interactions between the headquarters in Delhi and our own forces in the front were happening on Zoom. So now they realized it's risky, and they banned using Zoom conferencing. So I think some solutions will be found, because I don't have the exact answer. Yes, security is always there.
Hi, sir. I actually have one more question. It's with regards to the space debris, sir. Like, since we have so many satellites coming up now, like 42,000 satellites SpaceX is saying, and then 700 plus satellites OneWeb, and then 16,000 satellites Telesat. Even we are coming up with so many satellites. And with the orbital nature of the satellites, they will eventually cross over the Indian geographical areas, Asian lands, and all those things as well. So even ISRO has come up with this new Space Situational Awareness Center, right? So I just wanted to know any new regulations or something coming up from ISRO perspective to be put on upcoming satellites.
No, actually, yeah, this is, all will have to be governed by the UN regulations. So, see, the geostationary satellites at the end of the life, they are kicked up actually. When still little fuel is left, they say that they are sent to graveyard orbit, and the LEO will have to be made to re-enter and burn actually. So that is what globally there is a lot of effort. There is also an effort to scavenge some of the satellites. It is still an area where a lot of research is going on, deorbit sale. If you see, experiments where end of the life, the satellite will have something wherein a huge sail is deployed, like a parachute kind. It will be folded and kept like a matchbox, but several square meters wide sail. It will introduce more drag. It will come back and will re-enter, and en route it will get burnt actually. And there are also some missions they are trying to scavenge the satellites. I really don't know how, but when I was still working with Antrix, the Ukraine Space Agency had come with a request for us to launch 8 satellites, 4 for scavenging LEO debris, 8 for scavenging geostationary debris. So I think some solutions will emerge, but scavenging thousands and thousands of satellites will be a big job, and it will be also a hazard for launching new satellites, launchers. Today with NORAD or whatever tracking, we also have COLA, they say collision avoidance study we carry out for each of our launch vehicle missions also. Sometimes in the last minute we will reschedule our flight liftoff time or 1 minute, 2 minutes and things like that. So today, I mean, MOTR, that is what is that, medium orbiting some tracking radars, and with the help of tracking radars, with the help of NORAD data, everybody does a lot of collision avoidance studies before each launch. But this is going to be a big nuisance. I know, because the space science people, the astronomers, have raised strong objection that the satellites will be reflecting a lot of light, and it is a nuisance for observing space, through telescopes. So the astronomers have expressed concern, and I also read somewhere that the future Starlink satellites will be painted with some coat. Even solar panels will be made in such a way that they won't reflect and tamper the incoming radiance from outer space for the observers on the ground. So I think this area will logically evolve into something.
But sir, do you think there is any mandatory need for putting up regulations in the upcoming satellites for maybe any, with regards to maybe saving up some fuel for the LEO and MEO satellites so that they can get back to the atmosphere, or some such regulations should be made mandatory for upcoming satellites?
At least in our space policy, draft space policy bill or whatever, such regulations are not there today. I have also not come across such regulations. I heard somewhere the new NASA chief, Bill Nelson, telling that they want to use space sustainably. I don't think any concrete policy guidelines have been issued by any government globally. What I can do is, like anyone does, I also receive a lot of this input, because in Google, several keywords you can give and you get a lot of global news several times a day. But I haven't really seen any policy being enacted by any government. But if there is anything, I will share it with Abhimanyu. But it is a tough job, because at the United Nations level only, UN Outer Space Office level only, something has to happen. But people are conscious, because even private people, I am very sure, will be more conscious, because Chinese want to outsmart everybody. No, Elon Musk does, and they will at least make 10 more in their constellation. They're going very strong. So there will be a lot of nuisance up in space in the coming days. That is sure. It was a great pleasure. Yeah.